Welcome back to another episode of ReelTalk, everyone. If you're new to the channel or haven't seen these videos before, these are a place where I can give an impromptu take on politics, culture, and whatever strikes my fancy, while combining it with one of my favorite hobbies of all time, that of fishing. My reflection for you all today is actually based on an older talking point that has recently been in my mind as of late, especially when it comes to the subject of the internet. As you can tell by the title of this video, it is on the subject of digital ayahuasca. This is sort of an analogy or some kind of way in which I try to describe this generation's online internet usage, myself included. And by this generation, I really just mean more so this present time in 2023. I wanted to talk it out with all of you and maybe see how well this idea has held up in my mind in comparison to how things have changed since the last time I really gave it any major form of discussion. Digital ayahuasca, in my mind, is a way to attempt to understand how our internet usage works. The online places we go to are physical spaces in a digital plane, so to speak. They're not real places. John Perry Barlow talked about this in the 1990s, that, does the internet have a place? Is there a place in cyberspace, is the talk that he discussed. And he had said that at that point in time, of course in the 1990s, there were places that we could go to, websites, fan pages, and so on, and what better for him to reference than, of course, him being a lyricist for the Grateful Dead, and that in the real world, these deadheads had to literally uproot themselves and follow the band along in order for them to have a place that they could go to, for them to follow the band along. There wasn't a physical location that they could call their own, but on the internet there was a place that they could go to. There were websites. There was the band's website where they could see touring pages and communicate with one another on forums and posts, and that old form of the internet allowed people to have a place in cyberspace, much in the same way that a lot of us still regularly haunt various image boards, our various places on Twitter, and so on. But at the same time, this astral plane in a digital sense is a place that we can go to. It is also a drug. I consider it something that, how light has a wave particle duality, so does the internet. It has a consumption drug-like property, along with it being a physical space or digital space that we can attend to, sort of a digital astral plane. And when you do that, you consume this drug so you can be a part of a place online where millions of other people are screaming into this void of screams, and you were just hoping and hoping that someone on the other side might be able to hear your scream in the midst of everyone else screaming at the top of their lungs to where it sounds like a jet engine is taking off right before your very ears. Now, for the longest time, I've thought so far that this is a pretty darn good analogy. After all, we all take this drug of our own choice. It is all certainly tailored and formatted. But the one thing that I didn't consider is that with ayahuasca, it is a natural thing. It is something that can be sought after and consumed and ingested in a way to engage in this psychedelic experience. And the internet is very much a psychedelic experience. It does rewire our neurochemistry. Our exposure to the worst aspects of humanity has made us incredibly acrimonious. It has made us less empathetic over the last 35, nearly 40 years of internet access by the large portion of Western populations. There's a woman by the name of, I think, Sherry Turkle. She wrote a book in 2011 called Alone Together when it comes to the internet, and she had noticed even then in 2011, over a decade ago, that we were already becoming less empathetic. We were less likely to have sympathies, and I think in 2023 that is abundantly clear, where we are exposed to the worst aspects of the online world, and at the same time we are exposed through the internet the most dehumanizing and desensitizing things all the time, 24/7, whether it be about the war in Ukraine and watching people laugh and mock soldiers on both sides of the conflict when they are on camera moments before their death. We see the same thing when LiveLeak was still more widely available, whether it was watching car accidents, construction mishaps, or, of course, awful crimes from criminal cartels and syndicates. And at the same time, because there is this digital space, a physical dislocation, we're uprooted from talking to one another face to face on the internet, we're more likely to be in a drug-fueled rage than we are above anything else. And it puts us in a strange, precarious position to where we have become increasingly dehumanized. We have no sympathy towards our fellow man and our fellow countrymen, and we long, on both sides, both, say, the political left and right, for the abject destruction of our enemies. We have witnessed very rapidly over the course of 30 years a digitally supported or digitally enhanced form of polarization, dehumanization, and at this point we're ready to go with Radio Rwanda, but on a widespread digital scale when it comes to the issues of immigration, race, and so on. But the other thing that also crossed my mind when thinking about this digital ayahuasca analogy is that, yeah, it's something that we can go out and sort of find naturally in ways to consume ourselves. But when we look at the digital platforms that we're on today, it's no longer someone made an image board or a forum or their own personal website that you can all come in and discuss. Some of those still exist. In fact, I was doing a job interview not too long ago, and they were asking me to write something. And ironically, a place that had a lot of great resources was from a forum that was founded in 2008 that still has a very large, popular community. And the forum is even older than that because it used to be a part of some famous football player's website, and they divorced some time later, so the forum could still exist on its own operations. And I thought that that's impressive because you don't really see that nowadays. A few people may do that with Urbit, or they may come up with their own website or their own wiki for people to discuss things. The Sallow Forum obviously doesn't exist anymore outside of the archives. And the only thing that comes to my mind now is that maybe this analogy, this digital ayahuasca expression actually doesn't hold up very well. And this is in part because, well, most of the drugs that we consume online, digitally speaking, are all made prim, proper, and manufactured after some digital pharmaceutical company in Silicon Valley. Whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or X, as Elon Musk likes to call it, one can't help but think to himself that these are all pharmaceutical drugs. It's big pharma, but in a digital forum. There is a standard and a system and a mechanism for quality control and for us to be able to consume these drugs. And if you show certain side effects like being a radical or having too extreme of an opinion or having an outburst where you say something that the censors don't like or that can trigger other nasty effects in other drug users, digital drug users, I may suggest and add, all of it comes to a halt and a crash, and you're cut off and you're banned. Albeit, just like with other kinds of drugs like opioids, it's very easy to cut corners and get access to these drugs, even if you're kicked off the official big digital pharma accessible platforms like Twitter and so on. Yet at the same time, what comes to my mind in these moments is that others will pursue harder drugs, just like opioids may lead to fentanyl or heroin or something stronger. And so if you get kicked off the mainline goods, where else are you to go? Well, the digital ghettos of other platforms certainly may have an opportunity for you to itch and get that scratch filled by the same kind of digital addled dopamine that everyone likes to look for. This is why, in part, I find it to be so important for us to consider the need to stay on, but at the same time, I wonder how much of a good it would do if we were to cut ourselves off cold turkey. That's the problem, I think, with analogies when it comes to the internet. It's very difficult to translate to other things, such as frontiers, or drugs, or places, in part because the online space is a digital, nearly metaphysical space that exists, yet at the same time, there are plenty of people all over the world, whether willingly or unconsciously, that do not consume. And I think about the next generation when this conversation comes up. There's already this neurological speciation that's taking place. There are parents who are guarding their children's minds by limiting their screen time access, forcing them to read books as a kid. I was in a grocery store not too long ago, and there was this little girl, blonde, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and she had a book in the cart she was reading, and her mom was picking things out. And I'm not one to usually make conversation, but she was reading a book that I remember as a kid reading, and I had asked her if she was enjoying the book. And she said yes, she was enjoying the book, although she wishes that she was doing something else. And I asked her why, just striking up friendly conversation. And the little girl had responded saying, well, my mom is forcing me to read before I can access the iPad or a computer. And I said, well, your mom is being very smart. And the mom chimed in and she says, yes, I don't want her on the screens all the time, on the computer or on the iPhone or on the iPad 24/7. And I told her, in my opinion, I think that that's a very good thing. And then on the other hand, just 3 aisles down, when I was picking up bread, there was a kid who had both a phone and an iPad, just tapping away and listening, overstimulated and oversensitized and some sort of sensory overload, but looked like he was in nirvana in some respects. But he was a little older, probably 8 or 9 or 10 years old. But it was a strange thing to consider, because we're already pumping our kids full of these digital drugs at the same time as we warn ourselves about other dietary concerns, such as microplastics and overly processed foods and so on, and the need to go organic on a lot of things. And so, if I am to sort of wrap up this reflection for you all today, it's definitely a drug of some kind. It is standardized in its formats because almost every major social media company in the world hires people that have a background in neurochemistry and psychology to ensure that these apps and these websites are addictive as humanly possible. At the same time, we are no longer in a place where we're cooking up our own drugs and experiences like that of the LSD or Ayahuasca guys in the 1960s or 70s. Things are far more legalized and regulated, but can ensure, like opioids, that you can get access to them, but you might want harder stuff. The same thing goes with pornography. I think about the Wachowski brothers, the fellas that made the Matrix movies, and their early exposure to transsexual pornography had enabled, by their own words, their own very public transitions. And this, of course, was in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and now you look outside and you consider the people that have transitioned by access to hardcore pornography that encourages your brain to seek out harder and harder hits and the most depraved things possible. The same thing doesn't just apply to sexuality, it applies to our politics, our hobbies, and our ability to gatekeep and argue with other people. The digital drugs that we take are dangerous, and I don't know how well this analogy holds up, but so far it's the best one I have for your reflection today. We're in a really weird spot when it comes to the online, because whether you buy into dead internet theory, and I certainly do, and as bots get more and more realistic, and you have the capability to generate images of your own desires. Billionaire Psycho has a great piece on this about the Pygmalion and the anime girl. One can't help but think to himself, we're going to be creating our own drugs again with general artificial intelligence and so on, and large language models. Replica and the rise of sex bots, as others have written about, definitely comes to mind. We may come to a new era where we're creating our own drugs again, but they're open-sourced drugs, like open-sourced programming, wherein Silicon Valley and other organizations and companies and Sam Altman and such are releasing these things to the public saying, enjoy, we're letting you have access to these baseline chemical formulas for psychedelics. Have at it, kids. And these are the things that I think may come in the future. We may be in a sort of drug-fueled digital renaissance, if I were to say so. But maybe not a renaissance, but much like those on fentanyl and heroin and other opioid drugs. Instead, we may just be like addled zombies, or worse, like victims of those who take crocodile and other drugs in Eastern Europe and Russia, where our bodies and our bones are exposed, and this time there really is no going back, when our brains have become so necrotic that this is the only way we can function. Thank you all for listening and watching. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you all next time. God bless, and be prudent, everyone.